was tight!
Why do I love Sonic Heroes? I mean, when you consider that even in the title for the video, that I refer to myself as an apologist for the game, readily admitting it has some serious flaws and that my defense of it could easily be considered controversial, it's probably a fair question. After all, this game was a big step away from what has always been my preferred 3D Sonic formula. Not to mention a huge departure from the more serious and in-depth storytelling of the adventure games that I enjoyed so much. For me, Sonic Heroes marked a point in the series where the first true splintering of the fanbase occurred. No, I'm not talking about redesigns or transitions into 3D. People like to say now that these were some sort of issue back then, but I can honestly say, I never met anybody who cared. Up to this point, Sonic was still Sonic, and his move to 3D was looked upon no less favourably than Mario's. That whole Sonic never worked in 3D narrative wasn't spun until much later. Thank you, games media. But in the case of Heroes, long-standing fans, some of whom may have been playing these games since the very beginning, perhaps felt a bit alienated by this sudden shift in direction, all in the name of mass appeal on new platforms when Sega left the hardware business. If you went into Heroes blind expecting more of what came before, you were in for a rude awakening. And that just got a lot of people, myself included, off on the completely wrong foot with this game. And for the longest time, I've had extremely mixed feelings about it. Sure, I could always see there were some huge positives to the game, like its amazing music and stunning locations, but it still always felt like I was at odds with the nuts and bolts of the game. And in some instances, I probably was justified in feeling that way. But as time has gone by, and I finally revisited the game without that butthurt clouded vision of this game took my beautiful adventure formula away, there's undoubtedly a magic to Sonic Heroes, a charm, something it has taken a more open mind to see. And while we may have to resort to the dregs of Sonic critique like ambition, or at least it tried from time to time, I'm still going to try and explain why Sonic Heroes is probably one of the best games in the series, despite itself. Make no mistake though, that objectivity works both ways, and I'm certainly not saying that Sonic Heroes is perfect. Sonic Heroes and perfect in the same sentence. How funny. There are plenty of bugs, jank, and other annoying stuff to cover too. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and use that power of teamwork on the bell icon to be notified when I release more Sonic or gaming content. I make lots of in-depth analysis and discussion videos on all aspects of the Sonic series, so hopefully there's something for everyone to enjoy. Those simple clicks go a long way, and any support you guys show is seriously appreciated by me. Anyway, let's get started, shall we? On a conceptual level, Sonic Heroes is a bit of a mouthful. Who am I kidding? Sonic Heroes is an esophageal-smashing choking hazard of seemingly random ideas crammed into a single rainbow-coloured package. 12 playable characters spread across 4 different teams, creating 4 separate stories to play through? Yeah, the elevator pitch for this game is just bonkers. Not unlike what came before or after. Add in formations, leveling up, combat. Nothing about this game works on paper, but just stick with me here. Even from the early days of the Blue Blur, people were used to seeing and playing as Sonic's ever-expanding roster of friends, with the adventure games taking things even further, creating separate but integrated narratives for multiple new and returning characters. Say what you will about the player reception to some of these playstyles, the point is, multiple playable characters had pretty much always been a thing in this series. But Sonic Heroes takes this concept to the moon! And we now have those 4 different teams I mentioned, each consisting of 3 different characters that each in turn play their own unique role in said team. Gone are the days of playing through as each character individually. Now, you have to navigate the game while controlling all 3 team members at once. Kinda. As you make your way through the stages with each team, you can now switch on the fly between characters at any time. And managing your team by switching to the member that best suits the situation you're in quickly becomes the name of the game. When using each character, the game splits them nicely into what it calls formations. Speed formation sees you use the team's fastest member, and the playstyle is pretty much what you'd expect when playing as Sonic. Long straight sections, homing attack chains, light speed dash, all of these are best handled with the speed character. Flight formation sees you use the team's flying character, and is best suited for things like crossing large gaps, reaching higher areas, and dealing with most aerial enemies you'll encounter. And finally, you have power formation. Power formation sees you use the team's muscle, your knuckles, your omega, your big, and is best suited for breaking the many obstacles that litter your path, gliding on air currents, and dealing with this game's abundance of combat. Yes, combat. While destroying lots of enemies is not exactly a new thing to the series, an emphasis on slowing down and stopping for ever-increasing number of enemies with ever-increasing health bars that gatekeep the way forward, that's a new one. No, they're not RPG-level health bars, but something about even just the word health bar in a Sonic game is seriously off-putting for a lot of people. Up to now, for the most part, people were used to the enemies just going poof. One and done was the depth of most people's relationship with enemies in these games. So the idea of having to stop and whittle down a health bar rightly seemed a very strange addition back then. But when I reflect on this now, something I always failed to do back in the day, I start to realize that the health bars, and many of this game's obstacles for that matter, are only really an issue for those who are unwilling to learn and abide by this game's many mechanics and systems. If you go in like a bull in a china shop, trying to force a triangle peg into a square gap by using the wrong under-leveled characters to fight, you will only ever be met with annoyance and frustration.
Look, there's only one reasonable way to settle this. Rock, paper, scissors. Poor, predictable Bart always takes rock. Good old rock. Nothing beats that. Rock, paper, dope!
Basically, don't be like Bart. Do yourself a favor and leave all preconceived notions about what a Sonic game should be at the door. It's best to look at Sonic Heroes more like a strategy or puzzle game had a baby with a platformer. And once you start to see rapid games of rock, paper, scissors everywhere you go, now you are in the right frame of mind for this game. Now you are ready to maintain your flow, just like in other Sonic games. The first two acts of Sonic Heroes are at pains to teach you how and when to switch characters, with colored gates at first, literally forcing you into the correct formations for the task ahead, before moving to more subtle suggestions with its color-coded TV monitors as you progress further. There is always an optimum answer to the problem in front of you, and the pain points of this game's systems, for the most part, only ever rear their ugly heads when you yourself don't make the right choices, and try to force your way through an enemy or obstacle in the wrong formation. The trick is to learn the game and its systems enough to make the flow as smooth as possible. At first, the combat can seem really slow and cumbersome, especially if you're going in fresh with unleveled speed or flight characters. These guys are not well equipped for combat at first, with the game's expectation that most combat in the early segments of a stage be taken on with the power character. These guys are much more powerful than their teammates, and as a result, do some serious big boy damage to the enemies. Armored enemies or large groups should pretty much always be tackled with the power character. And as you make your way through the stage, and the speed and flight characters get leveled up a bit, you'll see that they also become quite formidable in their own right. And as you find yourself using the homing attack or thunder shoot to one-shot more and more enemies, you'll actually end up needing to switch to power formation for combat less and less. This whole philosophy of switching characters for the optimum way forward applies just as much to navigation as it does to combat. And while you will always need to make a more obvious choice between characters for each section, the subsections within those sections also have an optimum approach. And as you get comfortable with constantly switching, and get faster and faster at doing it, this is where everything in Sonic Heroes clicks. This is where the game's many systems come together to reward the player with that unmistakable sense of progression and satisfying flow of a Sonic game. The word formation for each team member was chosen for a very specific reason, as when you are in each of these three formations, the AI-controlled characters will take set positions around the leader. Speed formation sees your allies line up behind you in a straight line. Flight formation sees them stacked beneath you, and power formation sees them line up on either side of you. If you ever wondered why those 3 rows of rings are there, why some rings are floating above the ground, or why the rainbow-colored score rings are sometimes lined up differently, this is where some strategy needs to be applied to how you approach each of this game's stages. Even though it might primarily be a flying section, you may also get rows of rings to light dash. It's your choice whether you collect them as tails, or switch to Sonic for the extra points from light dash. You may be advancing along a narrow straight, or approaching a loop-de-loop where it's much faster to use a speed character, but switching to power formation to take out an armored enemy, or split your team across 3 separate loop-de-loops to collect even more items, is far more lucrative. This constantly evolving synergy between the team members is where the true beauty of Sonic Heroes lies, and all of the game's systems are built around the player learning and using all of the tools available to get the most out of their team. This notion of teamwork may sound corny on paper, and nothing demonstrates that better than this game.
We'll show that creep the real superpower of teamwork!
But the constant evolution of teamwork as you progress sees the game constantly introducing new ways for the characters to complement each other, and tying in really well with the increase in difficulty as the game goes on. These methods are always growing in complexity. Some enemies gain resistance to certain characters, or need a combination of character abilities to be defeated, like these metal flying enemies that need to be stunned with a flying character before being taken out by power formation, electric flying enemies that are immune to homing attacks without being grounded by Thundershoot, or these chonky boys that are best dealt with by a combination of Thundershoot and good timing with a power character. The combat forces you to think about how you're going to handle each encounter, whether that be removing an enemy's shield with Tornado Jump before taking them out with power, saving yourself having to switch to power at all by revealing an armored enemy's weak point with speed, or just annihilating the horde with brute force power. But as you continue to play, mastering the game's ethos, this relentless and constant switching quickly starts to become muscle memory, something that you just do in a reactionary way, regardless of what the hint screens tell you. By the middle of the game, I pretty much stopped noticing them entirely. Something we've barely touched on so far is the leveling system. Leveling up in this game actually has a huge impact on not just combat, but also how efficiently the team can navigate the stages. Of course, combat is where you will see the most tangible benefits. All attacks will do far more damage, making speed and flight formations a lot more viable by themselves. And the power character's abilities for destruction are dialed up to 11. Yeah, things are still handled best with speed for homing attack chains, flight for aerial enemies, and power for armored bots or large groups. But the question of who to pick for which encounter certainly matters a lot less if you level everyone up fully. But you also get really cool passive perks when just moving through the stages, like these poles that usually require a tornado jump to activate, when fully leveled only require a homing attack, a top speed increase for speed characters, and even a flight gauge boost for flying characters. All you gotta do is find the power cores. Even the leveling system brings with it all those little elements of puzzle and strategy we spoke about before, as you'll need to ensure you're leveling all of your characters so that your team is at its best in any situation. Power cores don't drop from enemies for the character you're currently using, meaning switching is advised to spread them out evenly between your team, especially in the early sections of a stage. Who you pass a checkpoint with is also crucial here, as the team member you control when it activates will gain a level. This is really handy if anyone is trailing behind, as for the most part you can switch at will in the lead up to a checkpoint. You can still find power cores hidden throughout the stages. A lot of the time, if you take the game's formation suggestions, you'll tend to find them pretty easily. But for creating the strongest team as early as possible, it's best to be strategic with leveling too. What, you thought we were done with this metric ton of systems and mechanics? No. We haven't even started team blasting yet.
Anyway, I started blasting. Bah, bah. No, I don't see so good, so I missed.
Chaos control!
Team blasts are special moves unique to each team that become available when the team blast meter is full. You fill it by collecting rings, destroying enemies, shaking what your mama gave you, all that good stuff. And when it's full, let's just say Eggman's robots better watch their backs. At a basic level, team blasts are screen clearers that destroy all enemies in range instantly. There are subtle differences to the bonus effects for each team, designed to suit their individual personalities. Like Team Rose's dancing with instant levels up for each character, temporary invincibility, and a free shield. This makes perfect sense as Team Rose represents this game's easy mode. Team Dark's Chaos Inferno that uses Shadow's Chaos Control to temporarily freeze time afterward. And Team Chaotix's, singing. Why anyone imply that their performance warranted payment, with each enemy destroyed awarding rings, I'll never know. But I'll admit, hearing it never fails to bring a smirk to my face. That's equal part embarrassment and pride. Team Chaotix lacks a lot of the pomp and frill of the other teams, simply serving as a screen clearer. Even holding onto and using your Team Blast comes with an element of strategy, as if you hold onto it for too long, you've potentially wasted the second one you could have built up in that time, or use it too soon, and you may leave yourself vulnerable to more dangerous enemies you could have just blasted later in the stage. All of these ideas and mechanics make Sonic Heroes sound batshit crazy on paper, but somehow, when you see them all thrown together into the soup that is this game's systems, it just works. Mostly. As I alluded to at the beginning, the stage design was always an area where Sonic Heroes shined for me. Gone are the standalone, more realistic and narratively connected locations of the adventure games. I loved those, they formed part of my favourite 3D game in the series, but there's no denying they were a big step away from what had come before, with Sonic Heroes genuinely returning to Sonic's classic roots, where most other games just paid lip service. The game is chock full of bright, colourful, distinctly designed locations, where what came before pretty much has no bearing on what you might see next, and the only limitations to the design is the imagination of the developers. Just like the classic games, the stages in Heroes are a feast for the eyes, and I can't think of a single one that's a letdown in this department. The act system applied to the zones in the classic games also makes a return, with each major stage theme being split across 2 levels. Seaside Hill and Ocean Palace, with their beautiful stretches of pristine beaches, sunny, rainbow-filled skies, and groups of migrating turtles, are designed to teach you all of the game's fundamentals. Long, unobstructed straights or rows of rings? Best use Sonic. Aerial enemies, tight platforming or high ledges? Give Tails the lead. Air currents, breakable objects, or hordes of enemies? Let Knuckles loose to rip him anew. Everything from parallel rows of rings, branching loop-de-loops, alternately arranged score rings, to formation cannons. These are all introduced to you right from the beginning, allowing you to start getting a handle on all of it for later. And the throwback checkerboard patterns on the mountains never hurt either. Next, we take on the sprawling futuristic city of Grand Metropolis, with its labyrinthine network of energy-powered pathways that need to be reactivated to pull you forward at speed. I don't know if it's just me, but this place always reminds me of the city of Limblum from Final Fantasy IX, and that's just another feather in the cap of an already awesome stage. Grand Metropolis and its second act, the Power Plant, take things up a notch with more pronounced alternate path options available, with the punishment for falling to the lower paths usually taking the form of unnecessary combat with this stage's more powerful robots, or just a slower route through the stage. These alternate paths and hidden areas, along with the many others throughout the game, are all put to great use in leveraging the team mechanics against the puzzle and strategy elements of the game. Have a character who's lagging behind in level? Well, taking certain pathways designed for them might be a good way of finding some power cores, if, of course, you can display your precision and mastery of their abilities. Coming up short on building that Team Blast for a tough encounter ahead? Just make sure to check every nook and cranny for rings and power-ups. Even if the way ahead looks tempting, there's often lots of cool things just out of sight. This element of rewarding exploration is a great example of something that has always been a big part of Sonic games. And with the amount of different mechanics and abilities in this game, there is plenty of useful stuff to find squirreled away everywhere. Casino Park and Bingo Highway. I could take or leave these stages. Let me rephrase that. I would happily leave these stages. In terms of their aesthetics, these stages are a colourful party for the eyes and everyone's invited. Literally everyone, but we'll get to that later. As pleasing to the eyes as they may be, for me, these stages are just a mechanical mess. The pinball physics seem way off, with what feels like a heavy pulling sensation dragging your character the opposite way you're steering at all times. And with no control over the other 2 characters on the table, you are still punished when they fall off or randomly disappear by having nobody to switch to in a bind. Not to mention that if you switch to a character still on the table when you do finally make your way off, you shoot back to their position rather than them spawning on you like they normally do. Regardless of skill, often the quickest way through these sections is to avoid them altogether. And regardless of how well I've learned to work around these temperamental stages in my time playing this game, I will always see these levels as a low point among the rest of the insane highs of this game. I guess it just shows that trying to cash in on the popularity of Casino Night doesn't always pay off. But something you'll probably have noticed by now is that the stages in Heroes often have a distinct theme or gimmick to them. After learning the basics around switching characters for the various enemies and obstacles in Seaside Hill and Ocean Palace, Grand Metropolis and Power Plant pushed your skills in combat to the next level with some tougher enemies, and get you used to moving pathways and basic grinding in Act 1, before adding vertical versions and rising platforms in Act 2. Casino Park and Bingo Highway add pinball mechanics, along with some tighter platforming, with Rail Canyon and Bullet Station testing your mastery of a lot of these skills even further, including pretty much all of the grinding that ever grinded, or will ever be grinded. Grinded? Ground? The point is, your skills in everything the game expects of you are built up steadily over time, before it eventually goes full tilt, pedal to the metal, balls to the wall on you, and combines all of these tests in the later stages. And this is good game design. While the theme from stage to stage can vary quite drastically, from the deserted coastline to a bustling city, a giant gambling resort to a secret canyon base, Act 1 and 2 of each stage, however, generally flow together really nicely, with the many islands of Seaside Hill steadily leading inland to the massive temples of Ocean Palace, the huge city of tomorrow, Grand Metropolis, clearly overrun by Eggman's robots as they siphon the power from the roads for their own needs, sure enough leading our heroes to the power plant at the city's center to send these metal freaks packing. And the seemingly floating frog forest suspended high in the clouds, eventually seeing you descend into the dark and dreary lost jungle below. I always really enjoyed the more cheery, upbeat atmosphere of Frog Forest, with its crew of friendly amphibians that summon the rain to help you progress on growing vines. And how it's all flipped on its head for the more somber Lost Jungle in Act 2, where the poison frogs serve as more of a hindrance by doing the exact reverse of the previous act. The music does a great job in helping set the mood, and like the stage designs themselves, the music in this game as a whole is just fantastic. The desired atmosphere and personality for each stage is matched perfectly by the music. The laid-back guitar work of Grand Metropolis, electric guitars shredding as you blast through Whale Canyon and Bullet Station to reach Eggman's base in the nick of time. The more relaxing melodies of Frog Forest as you grind on vines in the clouds above the jungle. Or the wacky and mysterious themes of Hang Castle and Mystic Mansion. All of the music is paired perfectly with the stages. You know, something I've realized the more and more I play Heroes is that this game actually smacks of Sonic 2 for me, with its wild mishmash of awesome stage themes and amazing melody-driven soundtracks, ultimately ending with chasing Robotnik into the sky for a final showdown. The theme for Egg Fleet plays no small part in how epic the atmosphere in this stage is. It starts out with a grand statement from the leader of each team, with Shadow in particular getting one of his few great lines of the game here. You escape the surreal illusions of Hang Castle and Mystic Mansion, and pursue Eggman to the outer limits of space. And the sense of scale as you look down at the planet's surface far below is just awesome, making the sheer size of Eggman's armada all the more impressive as you see it looming all around you. This stage is up there with some of the longer ones in the game, but that awesome guitar-driven track combined with its amazing set pieces always make it go by in a flash for me. With the destruction of Eggman's fleet, we reach the final stage of the game, Final Fortress, Eggman's last remaining warship. This stage sees you grind luminous rails, the giant power cables for this colossal base, during a thunderstorm. I always loved how the bright, colourful rails contrasted against the otherwise dark and gloomy atmosphere of navigating this giant, lifeless machine in the storm. Final Fortress gives that epic feeling of a final Sonic stage that players have been used to since the classic Death Egg saga. Death pits everywhere, hordes of tougher enemies, and rows of giant lasers shooting at you as you try to navigate this truly gargantuan ship. All the skills that you have been learning as you've made your way through the game are put to the test here. Grinding, tight platforming, the synergy between team members for both navigation and combat. Everything you've been doing has been leading to this stage, and depending on which team you're using and how well you've embraced the mechanics, everything Sonic Heroes is about should be crystal clear now. If you've stuck around this long, you're probably sat there wondering to yourself, how exactly is this guy being an apologist for this game? He's done nothing but flat out praise the shit out of it, and hasn't apologized or made excuses for anything. Throw his bias ass in jail with all the 06 defenders. Yeah, I would probably fit in well there. But all that praise I've generously heaped onto the game since the beginning of the video comes with a fair few disclaimers, a smackerel of caveats, and just a hint of... Heroes carries with it a lot of ambition in its gameplay, just like we've seen in the adventure games. The only problem here is that sometimes it completely lets itself down in its execution. The sheer volume of interlaced systems and mechanics is a bit like spaghetti in its complexity. And more often than I'd like to admit, these systems can sometimes play not so nice together. The whole thing buckling under its own weight. A lot of people, especially those who aren't die-hard Sonic fans, often argue that the adventure games lacked polish, or that the camera was broken and they hated it, or whatever. But Heroes? Heroes requires a careful hand at all times, in order to avoid the many random, let's just call them quirks, that will outright kill you. Often 9 minutes into a 12-minute Team Dark stage. Speed ramps that are just not feeling it today.
You know, I really don't feel like being blamed.
Yeah, you might just run straight through those. Murder springs that send you on the completely wrong trajectory. Set pieces that sometimes randomly put you in the wrong place and kill you for no discernible reason. Seriously, I kept my hands off all the buttons both times and got completely different results. Being punished for going too fast. In a Sonic game, yeah, this can be a nice shortcut if you're ready for it, skipping a small section of the stage, but for the unsuspecting player, it's a bit unfair. In some of the earlier sections, grinding too slow can get you killed by the trains. Now I'm being killed for going too fast. Sometimes I wish Heroes would just pick a lane, and the context-sensitive action button can really be a pain at times, rapidly switching between multiple functions as you try to use just one, sometimes even forcing you to stop completely to make it work as intended. Will I tornado jump or use the intended light dash? Will I pull the switch or keep thunder shooting Sonic and Knuckles into the wall? I don't know. Even the formations, the whole premise the game is built around, don't always work as intended. The AI characters are just so random and sporadic that when you try to, for example, hit all 3 rainbow rings, or go up multiple loop-de-loops by using Knuckles to collect all items, it really just depends what the AI is doing at the time, whether or not any of it even works. When things are good in Sonic Heroes, things are very good. You can build up a nice flow with quick and effective switching, keeping your progression going. Other times, you'll spend your time wrestling with pinball physics, fighting Knuckles' random suicidal tendencies, where he'll just off the stage. I've been likening this game to a Sonic game with puzzle or strategy elements. Sonic, but with a lot of rock, paper, scissors, and while yes, sometimes it's like a puzzle game, other times it's just puzzling, and you'll need to put aside some time to sufficiently scratch your head while pondering how exactly that same thing you do every time somehow killed you this time. It actually makes a lot of sense that Iizuka was left to work alone on the stages for the latter half of this game, after his colleague had to take time off for health reasons. It really shows. The guy lost 22 pounds from working himself to the bone just to get the game completed on time. In his own words, almost dying. That is just crazy. And it's stuff like this I try to keep in mind, to remind me that even when something isn't perfect, there were human beings working tirelessly behind it, in some cases putting more of themselves than anyone ever should, into making their game the very best it can be. To my admittedly untrained eye, it seems a lot of this game's issues are not helped by the change in engine from the adventure games. By Sonic Adventure 2, the team knew exactly how to make that engine sing, and I have to imagine that switching to a third-party engine for a game that would be multi-platform right off the bat was no easy feat. The physics in Heroes can be very slippery, and this often doesn't mix well with the constant switching of characters in a billion different ways and places, or the rapid shifts in the type of gameplay expected of the player. Some sections are literally too fast for the game to handle, and it's quite often this that causes the most issues. The GameCube version is definitely the most stable of the lot, but still not without its glitches. But, all things considered, it's in these instances that people who love this game learn to deal with its quirks and learn how best to play around them. Knuckles has an air attack you can use in tight spaces to avoid sliding off. It leaves you a bit vulnerable to attack, but still better than swan diving off a ledge. You can hold grind rather than repeatedly tapping it to avoid being hit by trains you seemingly can't outrun otherwise. And holy god, platforming over bottomless pits? Switch to Tails. Sonic's slippery physics and crazy homing spin will try to kill you any chance it gets, and Knuckles' lower jump and the loss of his climbing ability makes him a no-go as well. But another hugely important aspect to any good Sonic game is its replayability. That unspoken but ever-present understanding that the more you play the game and the better you become at it, the more fun it becomes. That unmistakable feeling of satisfaction as you maintain a perfect flow through the stages, tying in really well with the awesome ranking system from Sonic Adventure 2 that makes its return in this game. When things go your way, and the coding gods behind the game smile upon you, Sonic Heroes definitely offers that satisfying sense of achievement as you continuously improve your knowledge of the mechanics and stages, constantly working towards improving your time and score as you play through them again. But when the game is being less kind, a lot of deaths and near guaranteed loss of your A rank quite often isn't really down to you, and that sense of having your victory stolen through no fault of your own can sometimes be a bit too much, and usually marks the point where I'll take a bit of a break from the game. Basically, when it works, it's great. When it doesn't, not so much. Don't worry though, the way this game's teams are implemented, you'll have plenty of time to practice, as if you want to get the full and complete ending, you'll need to play through those same 14 stages 4 times anyway. For 3 of the 4 teams, Sonic Heroes takes a kind of Sonic 3 and Knuckles approach to difficulty, with each team tackling the same stages, but depending on the team you choose, the stage might be longer or shorter, have different sections, more difficult enemies, more of them, or more challenging platforming and obstacles. Team Rose is easy mode, shorter stages, less enemies, an I win button for a team blast, and gated sections that automatically put you in the best formation. The game quite literally holds your hands with these guys. Team Sonic is probably best described as normal mode. Their stages are longer than those of Team Rose, they face a larger number of more difficult enemies, and their Team Blast is a simple screen cleaner, with no boost in level or free shields for the characters. If you've ever played a Sonic game before, this is probably the ideal starting difficulty for you. There's a good balance in difficulty versus seeing more of the game, and you actually have to learn the systems yourself to progress as efficiently as possible. Team Dark is your hard mode, and while you can start the game with any team in whatever order you like, Team Dark is fine-tuned to suit someone who has at least finished the game with Team Sonic. Here you'll find very little hand-holding in your choice of formation. The runtime for the stages are a lot longer, and the combat involves the toughest forms for each enemy from pretty early on. The sheer length of the stages, combined with the huge amount of enemies, makes for a much tougher time in getting all their A ranks, as if the game decides to play silly beggars with you and kill you through no fault of your own, 12-minute stages are less than ideal to have to restart from scratch. Team Dark will test your knowledge of the mechanics and the synergy you have with the team, and mastering the game with them is actually pretty satisfying. Team Chaotix is your mission mode. I was actually chuffed to see Vector, Charmy and Espio return from the depths of obscurity for this game. While most people will remember these guys from Knuckles' Chaotix back on the 32X, I fell in love with this bunch of misfits in Fleetway's Sonic the Comic. And while, as I said, I was very glad to see them, there had to have been a better way to include them than having them search out hermit crabs and lost chow in a thinly veiled attempt to hide the fact that you are now doing these same stages a 4th time. In some stages, they couldn't even think of a BS mission and just had you reach the end. I do love the struggling private detectives angle though. If they made a TV show about their misadventures, I'd gladly watch it. And I'd love to see this dynamic make a return, just with better ideas for their gameplay. Another common stumbling point for a lot of Sonic games is their boss fights. Some of them are absolutely fantastic, epic showdowns of impossible scale, or satisfying mechanics that make for a fun encounter. But I think the best way to describe the boss fights in Heroes is just plain strange. Bosses are split across 3 categories, with the chase style requiring you to pursue Eggman, avoiding his attacks while whittling down his machine's huge health bar. These encounters can either be a bit of a slog, as you slowly wear down his health by mindlessly spamming homing spin, or speedrun and cheese within 30 seconds in the most efficient way possible. This boss type is used to varying success, with the Hedgehog and Emperor being quite fun, and the Egg Albatross being more of a pain. There are ways to cheese him of course, but quite often it's a case of spamming homing attack or building up your Team Blast to take off large chunks of his health. There's also the gauntlet matches where you take on hordes of Eggman robots, which sometimes feel like they go on forever with Team Dark. These encounters kinda come across as a bit lazy. There are very few enemy types in this game, and as they're all classed as Eggman robots, most of them look the same, making these gauntlets feel very bland and samey. Taking enemies designed to hinder you in the stages and just throwing them into an arena setting doesn't really pay off. And while it's not exactly offensive, most times you just level your flight and power characters and spam your Team Blast, it's still just not very engaging, at least not for me anyway. And finally we have the woeful team battles. I know these are meant to be a game of rock, paper, scissors just like the rest of the game, but I don't care. The mechanics just don't suit an arena fight like this. Maybe it would have worked better as a race or something, I don't know, but this doesn't work. And if you do try and play by the rules and fight the way the game intends, you just end up with crazy shit like this. Mostly, I just spam tornado jump, and depending on the version of the game you play, that's often enough. But seriously.
If this was a human being, I'd shoot it in the face.
And that's all I have to say on the matter. Also, screw these things. The whole idea of finding a key in the stages and bringing it to the end without taking damage was actually an interesting challenge, but the physics in the special stages are just a pain, with even the slightest turn while not on the bottom of the tube, sending you flying upside down and losing all your speed. Let's just say there's a reason most people usually collect the emeralds with Team Rose. You teased me with a return to classic special stages and gave me this, and made it mandatory to unlock the final boss? Not cool, Sonic Heroes. The story was yet another area of Sonic Heroes that represented a big change from the adventure games that came before. And just like the gameplay, if you came into the game expecting more of what came before in the narrative department, you were in for quite the surprise. No epic tale of revenge turned redemption, no humans to complicate the story, no big plot twist with a surprise reveal at the end. Well, not really. Come on guys, it wasn't exactly a surprise. Also, nobody got shot or held at gunpoint, so that was nice. The basic premise for the story in Heroes is that Eggman intends to carry out his master plan for world domination in just 3 days, and openly informs the Sonic Heroes of his plans before daring them to stop him. Gee, that's a big red flag right there. Wonder why he'd do that.
It's a trap!
The other 3 teams each get their own loosely connected reasons to be involved in events and set out across the same locations to accomplish their various goals. Team Rose are after Sonic, believing he, for whatever reason, kidnapped Chocola and Froggy. Not much else of substance is going on with Team Rose. It's a marked step down from Amy's contribution to Sonic Adventure 1, but it did introduce a cool new dynamic between Amy, Cream, and Big. Weirdly, this composition of characters worked a lot better than I expected it to. Amy's big sister relationship with Cream, where she serves as a mentor figure for the young rabbit, and Big, the eldest brother, watching out for them both. Cream's innocence was always an endearing element to her character, but there's one point in Heroes where she nearly drops the sickest burn on Amy, letting slip that she's actually a lot more aware of what's going on socially than you might think.
I can't believe he did that just so he could get away. Mr. Sonic must be really... Really? What? Nothing.
Yeah, Amy, Cream thinks Sonic is sick of your shit, and that's just hilarious. There's some cool little nods to the past games too, like the data of Chaos being obtainable from a Chao and Froggy, as he swallowed a part of Chaos and an emerald in Sonic Adventure 1. But besides that, I think a lot more could have been done with Team Rose. Team Chaotix are a team of struggling private detectives, living paycheck to paycheck and taking any work that pays. Their mysterious client leads them on a merry chase through all the same stages as the others, testing them with various missions along the way. As I said before, the premise of the Chaotix as detectives I find really cool. It's just how it was implemented in gameplay that I have a problem with. It's funny, even though they would mostly be considered an inconsequential extra by most people for their gameplay alone, besides Neo Metal, the other major plot point of the game is actually revealed as part of their story. I mean, the game did lay it on pretty thick, with both Neo Metal being the big bad and Eggman being the secret client of the Chaotix, but still, it's something at least to add to the importance of their story. I like the team dynamic between this detective trio as well. They contrast each other just enough to make a really fun team, with Vector, the loud, brash muscle, complemented perfectly by the nerdy Espio, masquerading as the strong silent type, with his ninja power. And I always love how Charmy is portrayed as this insanely annoying yet lovable kid, no matter what medium he finds himself in. He's bubbling with energy pretty much the whole way through the Chaotix campaign, and watching him piss everyone off any chance he gets always puts a smile on my face, just like their Team Blast. And then we have Team Dark. Team Dark is just awesome, and even if there was no other redeemable qualities to Sonic Heroes, which there are many, I would be glad of this game just for being the reason that Team Dark exists. Rouge, as always, looking to locate treasure, decides to plunder one of Eggman's bases in the hopes of finding his secret fortune, but instead stumbles upon a slumbering Shadow and a royally pissed off ex-Eggman robot, E123 Omega. To get her treasure, Rouge needs to find Eggman to learn where it is. Shadow, now suffering from amnesia after his fall from space, or is he a robot? Who knows? But no, he isn't. A robot can't make me feel these things, okay? Needs to seek out Eggman to get answers about his past. And Omega needs to find Eggman so we can murder him for locking him in the broom closet. So Rouge, recognizing each of them have equally valid reasons to locate Eggman, decides the three will team up to find him together. The dynamic between these unlikely allies is probably one of the best this series has ever seen. On paper, there's no reason these three outcasts should work so well together, but they do. And while the relationship between all three starts out quite cold, a very means to an end arrangement, by the end, they grow to genuinely care about each other. Rouge, remembering the sacrifice Shadow made for the planet, is visibly upset at the idea that this might not be the real Shadow. And Omega, the seemingly uncaring machine, knows enough about the emotions of living things to comfort her with this line.
You know about cloning. The original must exist somewhere.
I guess robots can make me feel things. And the fact that this game leads to their really close friendship in 06 is just awesome. Team Dark was a really fleeting thing in the grand scheme of things with this series, but it's a part of it I will always fondly remember, and I have Sonic Heroes to thank for that. With the more dialed back narrative, there are far less scenes with long interactions between the characters, like we grew used to in the adventure games, and as a result, Heroes instead uses short conversations during gameplay to help establish the team dynamics and each character's personality. This can be a bit of a mixed blessing, as while there are some really cool lines of dialogue here, quite often you're stuck with an issue that's pretty synonymous with the 7th generation of gaming: repetitive tutorial or context-based chatter.
I'm falling! I'm falling! Yeah! I'm falling! I'm falling! I'm falling! Shut up, Tails!
But really, it's in the music where the depth of the teams and characters is hiding. Team Chaotix and Team Dark in particular have truly awesome theme songs, and when you actually stop and listen to the lyrics, you quickly find they give a much more detailed background to their teams than the game itself, including the one for the final boss fight in the unlockable last story. The lyrics for What I'm Made Of actually work perfectly from both Sonic's perspective and from Neo Metal's, which actually allows for a much more sympathetic angle for Neo's character. The big, super secret, nobody saw it coming final encounter with Neo is also a side of Heroes I think could have been done better. I know this game's development was insane, I know a lot of it had to be rushed with a wing and a prayer to get it released at all, but I would have loved to have seen what Heroes could have been if it was given all the time it needed in development. After scanning all the data it needed, Neo Metal evolves into its final form, and after a copy and paste fight with the other 3 teams, it's up to Team Sonic to use the emeralds to put a stop to Metal. Everything about this boss fight is pretty anticlimactic, from the lackluster mechanics to the fact that Tails and Knuckles don't even get true super forms. And when you look at the story of this game on paper, you're only left lamenting about what could have been. An evil AI ousts its master, ready to prove it can do what Eggman never could, gains the ability to scan life forms and take on their traits, before rebuilding himself completely from the debris of a giant warship. How could anyone get this wrong? What did Neo actually do in this game? In Sonic Adventure 1, chaos flooded and destroyed a whole city. In Sonic Adventure 2, Eggman blew a chunk out of the moon, and nearly caused the extinction of all life on Earth when Shadow activated Gerald's Doomsday Project. So, what did Neo do? He planned to take out all life on Earth and replace them with superior machines, sure, but we didn't really get to see anything. And that's a big shame. More characters can and should mean more possibilities for stories. Yet, one can't deny the irony that in the game with the most playable characters at that time, the story of Heroes was pared back considerably. But I don't think we entered this discussion with anything but full acknowledgement that this game has issues. And while in some places it's definitely a bit of a mess, the saying, "bless this mess," exists for a reason. And there's definitely a beautiful game, hidden away under all the jank of tangled systems and mechanics. They say that love is blind, and as a Sonic fan in general, not even just in the case of this particular game, that's the simplest explanation as to why I let so much slide with this series. Or why, despite obvious flaws, I can still enjoy these games for what they are. If there was ever a game in the series I'd love to see remastered, properly, it would be Sonic Heroes. The best example of a game in the series where at least it tried and it had ambition. Wasn't just BS. If you stuck around with me for this long, first of all, a big thank you. I had no intention of the video running for this long, but once I started playing this game again and putting all my thoughts to paper, there was just so much I had to say. Maybe too much, I don't know, that's really up to you guys. But when it comes to Sonic games, especially the ones from my childhood, there's pretty much no off switch. Just another thing I won't apologize for, I guess. But I want to hear your thoughts on Sonic Heroes. Did you play it back when it was new? Which version did you play? Did you only come back to it years later on PC or Dolphin to check it out? What did you make of its wild mechanics and shake-up in narrative from the adventure games? Can you see the beauty through the jank like me? Or were you unable to force yourself to love it unconditionally? Be sure to let me know your best and worst memories of the game in the comments below. As the original voice actor's last game, I think I'll always have a soft spot for Heroes, but I do understand that this just isn't the case for everybody. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like. And if you want to see more like this from me on Sonic or other games, please make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon to be notified when I release more. If you don't hit that bell icon, you pretty much aren't subscribed, so please make sure to do that. Those simple clicks are a huge help, and all of your support is seriously appreciated. A big thank you for watching, and as always guys, take care.
You just